I want you to try and visualize something for a second. Uh, Picture logistical operations so incredibly massive.
Oh, it's almost impossible to really wrap your head around.
Right, it is. Because it requires mobilizing a population that is roughly half the size of the entire United States. I mean, picture 150 million people stepping out into the punishing, literally 100-degree heat of the Indian summer in April and May.
Standing out there for hours, too.
Exactly. Standing in lines that stretch down rural dirt roads, wrapping around these dense urban city blocks, all just waiting to cast a ballot. And we aren't talking about a standard, 50 or 60% turnout here.
No, not at all.
We're talking about regions hitting the 80 or even the 92% mark.
It really forces you to completely recalibrate what mass democratic participation even looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have 92% of an electorate showing up in those kinds of weather conditions.
It's wild.
Yeah, voting ceases to be just this casual civic duty. It becomes this urgent, almost existential mobilization.
It really does. And, well, our goal today is to decode the mechanics behind that exact massive mobilization. We're going to be using a really comprehensive, meticulous analysis that was published in May 2026 from the Brockface blog.
Right.
And this source, it details the historic May 4th, 2026 Indian State Assembly elections. This covers West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Assam, and the Union Territory of Puducherry.
It's a massive amount of ground to cover.
It is. Now, before we really get into it, I need to make something very clear to you listening. Indian politics is incredibly polarized. And the materials we are dissecting today, they deal with really intense right-wing and left-wing strategies.
Very intense.
Yeah. So we are absolutely not here to take a side or, endorse any of these specific viewpoints. We are simply impartial guides reporting on the content provided to help you understand the ideas contained in the original source material. We are not endorsing any viewpoints. We're just reverse engineering the political machinery presented in this data.
And understanding that machinery is just so critical. Because this source material, it breaks down how decades-old power structures were entirely dismantled.
Right.
How modern celebrity forces completely disrupted traditional duopolies. And, how relentless hyperlocal campaigning redefined the whole political map heading into the future.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the 2026 electoral map, there were 824 seats up for grabs across these 5 territories.
Yeah, huge numbers.
But instead of just reading down a list of winners and losers, let's look at the underlying themes. We see instances where voters decided to basically hold the line, and then instances where they completely fractured the status quo.
Definitely.
So let's start with where the line held. In Assam, the BJP-led National Democratic Alliance, the NDA, they retained a really strong majority. The BJP alone secured about 81 of the 126 seats.
A very solid mandate.
Yeah. And in Puducherry, the NDA comfortably kept power too, with roughly 18 of the 30 seats.
Assam is actually a really fascinating baseline to start with, I think, because it demonstrates the compounding power of a very specific governance formula.
How so?
Well, under Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma, the NDA just secured its 3rd consecutive term there. And the source notes that they consolidated power in the Northeast by executing this triad of priorities.
Right, the triad.
Yeah, development, security, and cultural identity.
So just breaking that triad down for a second, when a state government heavily emphasizes infrastructure development alongside really strict security measures, they are trying to create this highly visible, tangible sense of order.
Exactly. Visibility is key.
And in a region as complex and historically volatile as the Northeast, providing that predictable order, while constantly reinforcing the preservation of local cultural identity, it creates a very sticky voter base.
Right. The voters feel seen and protected.
Yeah, the electorate looks at the administration and says, the roads are being built, the borders feel secure, and our heritage is being prioritized. That's just a massively powerful incumbent advantage.
It creates a fortress of continuity, essentially. The voters in Assam basically rewarded the administration for delivering on that specific triad. Yeah. But if we travel down to Kerala, we see something entirely different.
Oh, totally different.
We see how quickly a highly educated electorate will dismantle an incumbent when that sense of delivery falters.
Yeah, Kerala really showed us that voters will absolutely punish an administration if the underlying mechanics of their daily lives start to fail.
Right.
The incumbent Left Democratic Front, the LDF, which is led by the Communist Party of India Marxists, they were ousted after 2 terms. They plummeted down to just about 35 seats out of 140.
A massive drop.
Huge. Meanwhile, the Congress-led United Democratic Front, the UDF, they swept in with a definitive majority of around 97 seats.
Now, Kerala has this deeply ingrained historical tradition of alternating power between these two main fronts. So the fact that the LDF had even managed to secure 2 consecutive terms prior to this election was already a major exception to their historical rule.
Right, but the source points out this wasn't just a simple reversion to the mean. It wasn't just the voters saying, well, I guess it's the other guy's turn.
No, it was much more active than that.
Yeah, the driving forces were intense concerns over state governance and a sputtering economic engine. I mean, Kerala boasts one of the highest literacy and political awareness rates in the entire country.
Very tuned in.
Exactly. And when you have an electorate that tuned in, ideology only buys you so much patience. If the economic realities on the ground aren't matching the rhetoric coming from the state house, that pragmatic voting culture will immediately pull the lever for the opposition.
The Kerala voter is, quite frankly, ruthlessly results-oriented. They use the opposition to discipline the incumbent.
Right, but Kerala is still playing within its established system. They are trading power between 2 known entities.
Yeah, the rules of the game stayed the same.
Exactly. But if we look at Tamil Nadu, the voters there didn't just reject the incumbent, they rejected the entire established political architecture. This is where the map gets entirely rewritten by a completely different kind of disruption.
It's the difference between a controlled demolition and just a sudden, massive shock to the system.
Yeah, the source outlines the rise of this massive South Indian film actor, Vijay, and his newly formed political party, TVK. The numbers here are just wild.
They really are unprecedented.
Out of 234 seats, TVK secures between 103 and 110 seats, instantly becoming the single largest party. Vijay himself wins both of the individual seats he contested.
Just huge.
Yeah, and in doing so, TVK completely shatters the traditional duopoly of the DMK and the AIADMK. I mean, these are parties that have maintained an iron grip on Tamil Nadu for generations. The incumbent chief minister M.K. Stallin's party, the DMK, drops to somewhere between just 71 and 74 seats.
What's fascinating here is to really understand the gravity of this. You have to look at the enduring power of celebrity politics in southern India.
Right, this isn't a totally new phenomenon.
No, historically, figures like MGR and Jayalalitha made this exact same transition from the silver screen to absolute political dominance. They proved that massive cinematic fame could be, transmuted into genuine political capital.
But TVK did something a bit different, right?
Yeah. What TVK pulled off in 2026 capitalized on a very modern sense of voter exhaustion.
So it's like anti-incumbency, but on steroids.
Exactly.
Voters aren't just tired of the DMK's specific policies. They are fatigued by the perpetual pendulum swing between the DMK and the AIADMK. When an electorate feels trapped in a binary system where the same players just trade scandals and power every few years, the appetite for a genuine third option becomes voracious.
Right. And you add to that voracious appetite the sheer concentrated charisma of a universally beloved actor, and you have a highly combustible political formula.
Right.
But TVK didn't just rely on Vijay flashing a smile from a rally stage, The source emphasizes that they married his fresh appeal with highly aggressive welfare promises.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They offered tangible economic benefits wrapped in this really compelling narrative of a total systemic cleanse.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of the campaign, and it's like a blockbuster movie opening weekend that completely rewrites the box office rules. But let's pressure test the reality of what happens the morning after the victory.
Governing is different than winning.
Exactly. Does star power translate into the grueling day-to-day grind of state governance? A film star commands massive fan clubs. Those fan clubs can instantly pivot into a deeply loyal, pre-built grassroots political network that can mobilize rallies, distribute pamphlets, drive turnout, all of that.
Yeah, the logistics are built in.
But translating a passionate fan base into a functional, bureaucratic, administrative apparatus, that seems incredibly precarious. I mean, can the people who organized movie premiere celebrations successfully manage municipal water budgets?
Right.
Or, complex coalition negotiations?
Well, the source data points directly to that impending friction. Because while TVK emerged as the single largest party, they're hovering just short of a simple majority, which would be 118 seats.
Ah, okay, so they have to compromise.
Exactly. This forces Vijay into the messy, compromising reality of coalition politics on day one. The soaring, uncompromised rhetoric of a solo superstar has to immediately transition into horse trading with smaller regional players just to form a government.
You're suddenly responsible for the grueling, unglamorous grind. Balancing those aggressive welfare promises against actual tax revenues, dealing with entrenched bureaucratic resistance, that's where the cinematic sheen wears off, right?
It really is. I mean, history gives us examples of actors who master that leap and become formidable long-term administrators. But it also gives us examples of political vehicles that stall out the moment they hit the friction of actual policymaking. TVK's ability to govern will be a real-time experiment in whether charisma can outpace institutional experience.
Oh. Well, while Tamil Nadu was a sudden explosion, the shift we saw over in the East and West Bengal was a completely different
Well,
beast.
night and day.
This wasn't a sudden surge, this was a meticulous, decade-long siege that culminated in a historic breakthrough.
The timeline of the BJP's rise in West Bengal, it's just a masterclass in relentless political engineering and adaptation.
Let's look at the sheer scale of the turnaround. Mamata Banerjee and her Trinamool Congress, the TMC, they lose power after 15 uninterrupted years.
15 years.
Yeah. The BJP secures a massive, decisive victory, taking 196 to 207 seats out of 294. The TMC is reduced to roughly 80 seats, but I think the most stunning data point here is Mamata Banerjee losing her own home constituency, the Habanipur seat, to the BJP's Suvendu Adhikari.
That is just, it's staggering.
The sitting chief minister, the architect of the TMC, loses her own backyard.
It completely shatters the aura of invincibility. It's a localized defeat that signals a total systemic collapse of the ruling party's mandate.
So to understand how the BJP pulled this off, we have to look at the historical data the source provides. Because the BJP was barely a footnote in Bengal politics a decade ago.
They were practically non-existent.
Right. In 2016, they won 3 seats. Just 3. In 2021, they surged to 77 seats, capturing about 38% of the vote share. But they suffered from a terrible vote-to-seat conversion rate.
Yeah, that's a common issue.
They were getting votes, but not in the concentrated ways needed to win individual constituencies. And then, jump to 2026, and it's outright dominance.
Right, and the blueprint for this victory, which they internally dubbed Mission Bengal, actually began way back in 2014.
Really? That far back?
Yeah, it was heavily backed by the organizational framework of the RSS. They didn't just parachute in a few months before an election. They engaged in exhaustive, booth-level SWOT analyses.
Assessing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Exactly, of
Yeah.
practically every single neighborhood. By 2025, they had established committees in over 70,000 of the state's roughly 91,000 polling booths.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because infrastructure alone didn't win it. They had a lot of that infrastructure in 2021 and still fell short. The source points out that their 2021 strategy leaned heavily on aggressive national rhetoric and harsh personal attacks against Mamata Banerjee. And the Bengali electorate totally rejected that.
It didn't resonate at all.
No, it felt abrasive, it felt foreign to the local political culture, and it actually generated sympathy for Banerjee as a local leader under siege by national outsiders. So what was the mechanism of their pivot for 2026?
They realized they had to rewire their entire approach. The source details how they shifted away from a rhetoric-heavy national campaign and imported highly granular organizational models from Uttar Pradesh, specifically overseen by Amit Shah. And the core of this was the Pana Pramukh system.
Okay, let's unpack the Pana Pramukh system, because this is where political strategy gets incredibly microscopic. From reading the source, Pana means page, and Pramukh means in charge.
Right.
So we're talking about the actual physical voter registry. Each page lists roughly 30 to 60 voters. The BJP is assigning one dedicated party worker to be solely responsible for just the voters on that single piece of paper.
It is the absolute ultimate manifestation of micromanagement. That workers' entire mandate is to intimately know those 30 families.
Wow.
They need to understand their daily grievances, ensure their paperwork is in order, and, most crucially, physically guarantee they walk into the polling booth on Election Day.
It sounds like the BJP realized you can't win a hyperlocal street fight with just a national billboard. It's like assigning a dedicated corporate account manager to every single family in the state.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And they layered this with a strategy called man-to-man marking. I mean, they had to rewire their entire machine down to the very page of the voter registry. You can throw the biggest, most expensive rallies in the world, but if you don't have an operative knocking on the door of the 45th name on page 12 asking why their street lamp is broken, you lose.
And that granular contact allowed them to harness the massive anti-incumbency sentiment that was just simmering on the ground. But, organizational contact is only effective if the voter feels safe enough to actually cast the ballot.
Oh, right, the security issue.
Yeah. The source highlights a massive structural intervention by the Election Commission, the deployment of 2.35 lakh personnel of the Central Armed Police Forces.
Wait, 2.35 lakh, that is 235,000 armed police officers, just to secure an election.
It's a staggering number.
It really paints a very dark picture of the local political climate. The source mentions this was to counter the widespread allegations of the TMC's political violence and the fear factor that historically suppressed voter turnout.
Yeah.
Furthermore, they executed a special intensive revision, or a SAR, of the electoral rolls to purge fake or illegal voters.
Good.
Though obviously something the TMC fiercely contested as a tool for disenfranchisement.
So you have hyperlocal voter contact combined with massive security deployment to ensure those voters can act without intimidation. But the final piece of the 2026 puzzle was a total overhaul of their cultural messaging.
Right, they dropped that aggressive posture that alienated voters in 2021. The overarching theme became para-Borton change.
Yes, but they localized it beautifully.
Exactly. They stopped sounding like politicians imported from the Hindi heartland and started actively invoking deeply revered Bengali cultural icons like the poet Rabindranath Tagore and the mystic Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
They meticulously blended their core ideological platform with a very specific, fiercely protected Bengali subnationalism. They promised cultural museums and spiritual circuits. And they contrasted this reverence for Bengal's past with a brutal critique of the TMC's present.
They really went after them.
They hammered the incumbent on massive alleged corruption, the syndicate raj of localized extortion, and severe failures in law and order.
The source explicitly cites traumatic state events like the Sandesh Kali and RG car cases. For context, we really need to understand why these specific incidents broke the camel's back.
Yeah, they weren't typical scandals.
No, these weren't just standard political graft or bribery scandals. These events struck at the absolute core of fundamental human security and bodily safety. When an electorate feels that the state apparatus can no longer protect basic physical security, the incumbent's protective shell shatters entirely. The BJP harnessed that visceral fear, pointed to the corruption, and positioned themselves not just as an alternative party, but as a necessary rescue operation.
And that combination, the micro-organization, the security apparatus, the localized cultural respect, and the promise of restoring basic law and order, is what drove that staggering 92% turnout. The high turnout was the vehicle that finally unseated the TMC.
So the BJP captures West Bengal after a 10-year siege. But winning the war is very different from governing the conquered territory.
Always.
The economic legacy they are inheriting is incredibly fraught. They released a manifesto called the Sankalp Patra, or Bharosha Shopath, the Trust Oath. The vision is to build Sonar Bangla, a golden Bengal. But the promises required to win those votes are astronomically expensive.
This raises an important question, though. The fiscal weight of their manifesto is staggering.
Let's hear the numbers.
Well, on the welfare side, they're promising €3,000 a month in direct financial assistance for women, alongside free bus travel. They are offering a $3,000 monthly stipend for unemployed youth or graduates. And the centerpiece is a vow to create 1 crore that's 10 million jobs and self-employment opportunities within 5 years.
Okay, we have to pause and look at the mechanism of that promise. How exactly does a state government conjure 10 million jobs in 5 years in a region where private capital has been fleeing for decades?
It's a huge hurdle.
Because beyond the welfare, they're also promising sweeping structural changes. Implementing a uniform civil code within 6 months, enacting a strict detect, delete, and deport policy for illegal infiltrators to protect local demographics, and releasing a white paper exposing 15 years of TMC corruption.
Right, and to understand the sheer difficulty of fulfilling those economic promises, the source provides a critical look at the history of Bengal's deindustrialization. Because West Bengal wasn't always a welfare-dependent state.
No, it used to be an economic powerhouse.
Exactly. At the time of Indian independence, it was the undisputed industrial powerhouse of the nation, a massive hub for jute, tea, engineering, and steel. Kolkata was the commercial capital. It was known globally as the Sheffield of the East.
So we have a historical paradox here. How does the Sheffield of the East hollow out so severely that political parties are forced to promise monthly stipends just to keep the youth afloat?
It didn't happen overnight.
Right. The source points to a multi-decade collapse, starting with the Left Front era. The Communist Party dominated the state for 34 years, from 1977 to 2011. And here is the profound irony. A pro-worker communist government inadvertently oversaw the destruction of the very industries employing those workers.
Yeah, the era became synonymous with militant trade unionism.
Perpetual strikes and the culture of garrows where workers would physically surround and trap management until their demands were met.
It created an environment so incredibly hostile to private business, the capital had no choice but to flee. But, the state's internal policies were really only half the problem. The source highlights a deeply impactful federal intervention, the National Freight Equalization Policy.
Wait, let's go over the economic mechanics of this policy, because they are devastating when you break them down. Bengal's primary geographic advantage was its proximity to massive reserves of minerals and coal.
Right, that was their edge.
But then the central government introduced the Freight Equalization Policy to subsidize the transport of those raw materials across the entire country.
Yeah.
So the central government essentially erased Bengal's comparative advantage. Suddenly, it was just as cheap to set up a massive manufacturing plant in western states like Gujarat or Maharashtra as it was in Bengal, because the freight costs were subsidized by the state.
Exactly. So between the militant local unions and the loss of their geographic edge, the industrial base just evaporated.
And when the TMC took over in 2011, riding a wave of populist promises to fix the state, the bleeding didn't stop.
No, it arguably changed forms, but it didn't stop.
According to the source, the militant unions were largely replaced by the syndicate Raj, these hyper-localized, politically backed networks that allegedly demanded cut money or extortion fees for any business to operate, or for any construction project to simply buy cement and sand.
The numbers are stark. The source notes that over 6,500 companies shifted their registered offices out of the state during the TMC's 15-year rule.
6,500 companies. Which brings us to the brutal macroeconomic reality facing the new BJP government. You cannot tax a hollowed-out industrial base to pay for expansive European-style social welfare stipends.
The math simply does not work.
Not in a state already burdened by a massive fiscal deficit and public debt. The BJP's solution to this impossible equation, according to the source, is the concept of double-engine governance.
Yeah. Double-engine governance is basically the promise that having the exact same political party controlling both the state government in Kolkata and the central federal government in New Delhi will unlock unprecedented economic synergy.
The theory is that total political alignment removes the friction. Delhi unleashes massive central funding, approves massive infrastructure projects, and provides incentives that crowd in private investment because they know the state machinery will execute it perfectly.
Right.
The source mentions a grand vision of creating a Delhi-Kolkata corridor, an eastern equivalent to the massively successful industrial corridors that transformed Western India. They want to leverage deep-sea ports, revive the ailing jute and tea sectors, and build sprawling logistics hubs.
But theories and manifestos don't build factories.
Nope.
If you are a major institutional investor sitting in Mumbai or London, and you've watched 6,500 companies abandon Bengal over the last decade due to extortion and unpredictable governance.
Yeah, you aren't going to suddenly commit billions of dollars in capital just because the political logo on the State House changed. What exactly does the BJP have to do in the first 180 days to prove this double-engine governance isn't just political branding, but actual economic safety?
The source notes that the markets are watching those first 45 to 180 days intensely. The BJP has promised immediate, systemic shocks to the old system.
Like what?
Clearing pending dearness allowance dues for state employees, implementing the 7th Pay Commission, and executing a zero-tolerance crackdown on that cut-money syndicate culture.
They have to demonstrate rapidly that the absolute rule of law has returned.
Exactly. They must prove that property rights are inviolable and that a contract signing Kolkata is actually enforceable. If they can't establish that baseline of basic economic security, the Delhi-Kolkata corridor remains a fantasy, and the crushing weight of their welfare promises could collapse the state's finances.
Wow. Well, the stakes are obviously incredibly high for Bengal, but the ripple effects of this victory extend far beyond the state's borders. We have to zoom out and look at the entire national chessboard. The events of May 2026 haven't just changed state-level policies. They have fundamentally altered the gravitational pull of the upcoming 2029 Lok Sabha general elections.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the national picture has been completely reconfigured.
Let's look at the sheer demographic weight of what just happened. By adding West Bengal's population of over 100 million people, the NDA now governs roughly 22 states in union territories.
It's massive.
That covers nearly 78% of India's entire population. Nearly 8 out of every 10 people in the world's most populous nation now live under a state government controlled by the NDA.
It is a scale of political dominance that provides an overwhelming structural advantage, primarily through what we call administrative leverage.
Okay, let's define the mechanics of administrative leverage. When the central government wants to pass a massive national welfare scheme, say a housing subsidy or a farmer income transfer, they rely on the state's administrative plumbing to actually deliver it to the individual citizen.
Right, the state does the actual legwork.
When the state is controlled by an opposition party, there is constant friction. The state might rebrand the scheme, delay it, or try to take sole credit. But when the NDA controls both Delhi and the State House for 78% of the population, that friction vanishes.
It's seamless.
The central government sends the funds, the state machinery delivers it flawlessly, and the political messaging remains completely unified from the Prime Minister's office down to the local village worker. The incumbent advantage begins to compound exponentially.
And beyond the plumbing of governance, there is a massive psychological and narrative victory here for the BJP. For years, the prevailing critique was that they were geographically and culturally capped, that they were a North Indian Hindi Belt party, completely incapable of penetrating the culturally distinct, linguistically proud eastern and southern states.
Winning West Bengal so decisively vaporizes that narrative completely. It proves that the Modi-Shah electoral machine is highly adaptable. If they can learn to speak the nuanced political language of Bengali sub-nationalism, invoke Tagore, and win a commanding majority, it sends a chilling psychological message to every other regional party in India.
It creates an aura of national inevitability as we approach 2029.
Which plunges the opposition NDA bloc into an immediate existential crisis. With Mamata Banerjee's stature diminished and the southern coherence fractured, the opposition isn't just losing states, they are losing the architects of their national alliance. How do you build a united front when the foundation is crumbling?
It's incredibly difficult. The source explicitly points out that West Bengal sends 42 members of parliament to the Lok Sabha. In previous cycles, the BJP struggled to maximize their yield there. But with the organizational momentum and state machinery they just secured in 2026, those 42 seats are now highly vulnerable to complete BJP consolidation in 2029.
So the NDA bloc is facing a total nightmare scenario.
Oh, absolutely. They lack a unifying counter-narrative to the NDA, their regional strongholds are fracturing, and they are up against a juggernaut that now wields the administrative apparatus for nearly 80% of the country. For the opposition, deep introspection isn't just a political exercise anymore. It is an urgent matter of basic survival.
And you know, this serves as a vital reminder to you, the listener. State elections might be fought over local potholes, municipal corruption, and regional pride, but they are the furnaces that forge the organizational momentum, the cadre energy, and the psychological dominance required to win massive national mandates.
The structural foundation for the 2029 general election was poured in the polling booths of Bengal and the massive rallies of Tamil Nadu in May 2026.
Which brings us to our final exploration. Because to truly grasp how these massive, shifting narratives are broadcast to 150 million people, we have to look at the mechanics of the modern Indian campaign trail and this singular figure who continues to dictate the terms of engagement.
The modern Indian election is a spectacle that simply has no parallel anywhere else in the democratic world. It is an exercise in absolute extremes.
The source material dedicates a fascinating section to this exact dynamic. These campaigns stretch out over weeks and months. We are talking about millions of mobilized workers, armadas of helicopters constantly crisscrossing the subcontinent, and massive convoys of vehicles kicking up dust in rural hinterlands.
It's staggering logistics.
But what is truly amazing is how they have fused this ancient physical mobilization with cutting-edge Silicon Valley technology.
They have essentially layered a state-of-the-art digital nervous system over a traditional sweat and blood political machine.
The text details the deployment of artificial intelligence to generate real-time translations across India's 22 official languages. This allows a single speech to resonate instantly across linguistic borders.
It breaks down huge barriers.
And they are utilizing AI-generated deepfakes not for disinformation, but to hyper-personalize outreach. It allows a candidate's likeness to address millions of individual voters by name. They possess highly sophisticated data gathering via the Namo app, feeding algorithms that drive targeted, microscopic WhatsApp messaging campaigns.
Yet at the very center of this unprecedented technological hurricane, the most vital component remains a single human being. The Modi factor.
Right.
The source cites a March 2026 Morning Consult Global Leader Approval Rating tracker that places Prime Minister Narendra Modi at an astonishing 68% approval rating.
A 68% approval rating over a decade into his national tenure. That basically defies the standard laws of political gravity. I mean, in most Western democracies, a leader is thrilled to scrape a 35% approval rating midway through a term before the natural forces of fatigue and anti-incumbency drag them down.
Right. The source analyzes the mechanics of this sustained popularity. Modi possesses this vanishingly rare ability to synthesize mass, emotional appeal with clinical organizational mastery.
How does he balance that?
Well, he manages to project the hungry, relentless outsider energy of a political challenger, while simultaneously wielding the absolute, unyielding power of an entrenched incumbent. He projects a sense of decisive, muscular leadership, guarantees the execution of welfare delivery down to the individual household level, and champions a brand of cultural nationalism that seamlessly transcends deeply ingrained linguistic and regional divisions.
But I want to push back on a paradox here.
Okay.
We just discussed their mastery of AI, real-time algorithmic targeting, and frictionless digital communication. They can reach a voter on a smartphone in a fraction of a second. Yet the source makes it unequivocally clear that the most potent weapon in their arsenal remains the physical mass rally.
That absolutely is.
We have AI-generated deepfakes and real-time algorithmic targeting, yet the most powerful tool is still a physical mass rally in 100-degree heat. Why hasn't technology replaced the sweaty, chaotic, on-the-ground human element?
Because politics, especially in the Indian context, is fundamentally communal and emotional exercise, not a sterile transactional one. A highly targeted WhatsApp message can inform a voter about a new housing subsidy. But standing shoulder to shoulder with 50,000 of your neighbors, feeling the physical vibration of the loudspeakers, watching the helicopter descend, and witnessing the leader physically exert themselves in the exact same punishing heat that you endure, that creates an indelible emotional bond that a glowing screen can never replicate.
So the physical rally provides the human proof of effort. It proves you are willing to sweat with the people.
Precisely. The technology, the AI, the apps, the algorithms, they are massive multipliers. They optimize the logistics, they micro-target the messaging, and they ensure the voter registry is managed down to the single page. But they are cold.
Yeah.
The rally provides the heat. In the Indian political ecosystem, if you don't sweat with the people, the algorithms won't save you.
If you don't sweat with the people, the algorithms won't save you. That is perfectly said. So what does this all mean? Let's synthesize exactly what we've uncovered today. The historic elections of May 2026 were not just a routine rotation of power. They were a masterclass in relentless political adaptation.
As we saw with the BJP meticulously rewiring its strategy over 10 years to finally capture West Bengal.
Right, and we witnessed the enduring, volatile thirst for systemic disruption, perfectly encapsulated by actor Vijay and TVK burning down the established duopoly in Tamil Nadu.
Which was completely unprecedented.
And most importantly, by expanding their administrative leverage over 78% of the Indian population, the NDA has positioned itself as the undisputed, overwhelming force heading into the 2029 general elections, leaving the opposition fragmented and searching for a reason to exist.
The strategic board has been completely rearranged, and the incumbent controls nearly every crucial piece of territory.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over something that takes the data we've explored today and projects it into a very strange, very plausible future.
Oh, this should be good.
We spent a lot of time discussing the rapid integration of AI and deepfakes to personalize political outreach, and we also explored the massive disruptive power of celebrity politics and cinematic charisma, specifically with the rise of actor Vijay in the South.
Right, the star power.
Well, as artificial intelligence generation becomes entirely indistinguishable from reality, as we can prompt code to generate perfectly photorealistic video and flawless audio, will the traditional star power and charisma required to sway millions of people be democratized by algorithms?
That really challenges the very definition of the human element we just established was so crucial.
Exactly. Think about the implications for 2029 and beyond. Could we see a political party deploy an entirely AI-generated regional persona, a completely digital influencer, programmed with the absolute perfect cultural nuances, speaking the perfect localized dialect, tirelessly interacting with millions of individual voters via video chat simultaneously, 24 hours a day?
Without ever making a gaffe or demanding a cabinet position.
Yes. If a flesh-and-blood movie star can upend an entire state government, what happens when a political machine can simply prompt the perfect, focus group-tested digital superstar into existence? Could a digital ghost eventually disrupt the sweaty, chaotic, human-driven political machines we've dissected today?
I mean, if the digital construct becomes capable of simulating the sweat, the entire paradigm of mass mobilization shifts. It's a fascinating, slightly terrifying horizon.
It is something we will all have to watch very closely. Thank you for going on this journey with us. Remember the image we started with: 150 million people, the lines stretching into the horizon, the sheer, raw heat of democracy in action. As technology evolves and the maps of power are continually rewritten, never stop questioning the narratives you were handed, and keep exploring the deep, hidden mechanics of the world around you.